Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It's time for the match preview with me, Andrew Musgrove, and John Gibson. Leicester, the visitors to St James's Park on Saturday, in what feels like a must-win game for Newcastle United and Eddie Howe, especially given that the cup game against Brentford is just a few days after. This episode is sponsored by NordVPN. You know what to do by now if you want to keep yourself protected and help the podcast at the same time. Click that link in the podcast description box for a discounted offer on your NordVPN plan. Help keep yourself safe, protect yourself against scammers and hackers, especially at this festive time of year when you might be online buying everyone some Christmas presents. John, welcome back to the podcast. How are you keeping? Are you well?
I'm okay. I'm not so certain about my team, but I'm fine.
That's good to hear. Yes, me and Aaron have made this joke quite often over the last few weeks that if we ask each other how we're doing on the podcast, we're doing all right in ourselves, but we have to separate that from Newcastle United because it does affect our mood. It affects everyone's mood listening and watching this. And we do come into this game against Leicester, down in the dumps, doom and gloom. And I don't think anyone is over exaggerating the importance of Saturday. It
No.
is a must win game, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, the bottom line of this situation is we've taken 2 points out of the last 12. We're sitting 12th in the table, which is nowhere near where we anticipated being. And we let 7 goals, we've conceded 7 goals in the last 2 games in what, a 3 day spell. I mean, however we dress that up, it ain't good. And it's surprising, but not surprising, if you know what I mean. But it's a sobering thought because it's nowhere near where we expected to be at this stage of the season. 12, you know, we thought we might be sixth or seventh and wondering about whether we can make the top four and make the Champions League. We aren't making the lower European positions at this given time, which is horrendous. And it's got to be improved, Andrew, and it can be and hopefully will be. But I mean, in the last 2 seasons, we've finished fourth and then seventh. And if we finish anything below seven at the end of this season, it's confirmation we're going backwards, Andrew, because we'll have gone from fourth top to seventh top to where we are at the moment. It's 12th. And I'm not suggesting that's where we'll finish, because we have an opportunity in the next week to get back to positive ways. But we've had those opportunities before. It's a matter of whether we take them or not.
And it's a matter of whether they build on the opportunities if they do indeed take them. So if we beat Leicester and then you beat Brentford, I want to see Newcastle United going to Ipswich and winning. I want to see Newcastle welcome Villa here and give them a good task of it. That's been their main issue throughout the season. They will pick up one or two wins maybe in a row, but then go on a run of three or four without
Yeah.
a decent result or a poor performance. So it's more than just about a win on Saturday. It's about making sure that they build on the good performances and good results, which they didn't do after that fantastic game against Liverpool, which is a massive frustration. I mean, I'll ask John the question first off that everyone is asking each other when it comes to Newcastle United. And I know you're just going to be honest with your answer. Where do you stand at the moment? It's a very simple question. It's probably not as simple as the question sounds, but are you Eddie Howe in or are you Eddie Howe out?
I think at this moment it would be rash and it would be unfair to have Eddie Howe out, because it's the first bump in the road he's had since he came here. I mean, proper bump in the road. 2 points out of 12 is bad. It ain't good. And he's on trial because any football manager's on trial, but in an ambitious club, in a big club, and we are with 52,000 sell out every home game and the sort of passionate following we've got, the man is on trial and it's up to him, and that's football. It always happens, and it happens to good managers as well as ordinary managers. He is on trial. I think to get rid of him now would be far too early and would be unfair. And also, where would you go and who you got? Who would you get? You've got to be careful what you wish for. It's easy to get rid of somebody. It's not so easy to replace them with somebody better. I wouldn't make any rash decisions like that at this moment, but I would definitely say that he and all these players, incidentally, are on trial. And the sooner the players remember on trial, because it's the manager that always gets a sack. The question you asked, which was very simple, should Howe go or stay? We could ask that of any of the players after watching their second half performance at Brentford. They get the manager the sack, but they could be sacked themselves. A lot of them on if players could be sacked, if you know what I mean. They can't be, um, but they've got to take a huge responsibility and get this club back on the road in the next few days against Leicester at home and Brentford at home.
Can I take your mind back to when Sir Boy Robson got the sack? And I appreciate I'm putting you on the spot here, but people
Mm.
have made comparisons to today and what's going on, and the calls from some Freddie Howe to go and what happened back when Bobby left. I mean, it's fair to say I think maybe history's been rewritten slightly, but do you see the comparisons between the two scenarios? You know, was Bobby did he pay the price for his players letting him down rather than his managerial talents? And
I,
is that what's kind of happening here under Howe? You know, he can only coach the team so far. And I've said this
yes, I mean
many
it
times
all.
over the last few weeks.
You're
It's up
right.
to the players to score the goals.
Yeah, you're right, Andrew. In as much as players dictate whether players get managers to sack, as much as managers get themselves a sack. And I mean they have gone on record. The young players who were around at the time when Bobby went, and people like Kieran Dyer have admitted that they let the manager down, and I think they did. We'd had a lot more success under Bobby than we've had so far in this current regime, because we were finishing third and fourth top, and we were playing in the Champions League. I think one season we had about 12 games in the Champions League under Bobby. So we had a lot more success than we've had now. And he was parachuted out 5 games or something into a new season, which was absolutely ludicrous. And I remember the chairman saying to me privately, when I said, "Look, the manager isn't under any pressure here, is he?" And he said, "Oh, no, it would be like shooting Bambi to get rid of the manager." And 3 days later, Bambi was shot. I mean, it was a ridiculous decision at that stage. And there's no, I think Bobby was let down by his board, but was let down even more so by players. And that's what, I was saying to you there when you asked about whether it should be Eddie Howe in or Eddie Howe out. The players will get Eddie Howe their sack if Eddie's not careful. Now, what can Eddie do about that? That's what we've got to see, because what has concerned me is that we all know that a lot of these players have got ability. We've seen when they play at their best, and a lot of them did against Liverpool, and they looked quality and individually quality and collectively quality. But it seems like, and I made the comparison, if they're playing the London Palladium, they're on form and they're singing and dancing. But if they're going to the local social club, they show a lot less interest and stuck their hand to a certain extent. It's like they can only get up for the big gigs. Now, to me, that's sacrilege, because what you if you take any individual player, the talent he's got is the talent that God has given him, and he can't do anything more, because that's the amount of talent he's got. But what ought to be a given is that his commitment to the cause should be 100%, and he can control that. In other words, he should burst in the gut every time it goes out. It should be a given. It's not a tap to turn on when you're playing the big sides and turn off when you're a bit indifferent. And in a team game, they don't all do it, but in a team game, it only takes three or four to not be doing their job in the right way. And because it's a team game, Newcastle lose because the rest are on blob with the other side. And that really irritates me to a great extent. And to a great extent, I sometimes look at Eddie now and I think, you're out your depth, because your life's in the hands of other people, not in your own hands. And it's up to the. I mean, Eddie Howe made a lot of these players better players when they joined Newcastle. A lot of them are much better players now than when they first joined Newcastle, and their reputation and so on. And they should remember that. and not just think, oh, I'm a big time Charlie now. Maybe I should be at some other club, or maybe that transfer is going to happen. They should remember that and do something about it. I mean, to a great extent, it's a huge challenge which Eddie is not completely in control of, because it's not just a matter of form; it's a matter of attitude.
And Alan Shearer mentioned on Match of the Day that he was concerned about some of the body language and some of the application. And I have to say, I agree with him as well in many ways. I always look at how players react after goals are conceded. I think far too many times this season, we have not seen the reaction from the players when the balls end up in the back of the net. And look, I'm not saying they should go over and start slapping one another and getting really angry and in the face, but I want to see some reaction, even if it's just like, a clap with the hands, like, come on, let's get back to it. We saw a bit of that against Liverpool, but for the large part, when they're conceding these sloppy goals, it's kind of just hands on hips or just arms out in the open. There doesn't seem to be that leadership or kind of geeing up of the players, or let's get focused, and
I
that's quite
mean,
a concern. But on the body language issue, do you agree with Big Al that there is a concern and that needs to change, of course, on
hundred
Saturday?
percent, 100%. And I've been banging on it before Big Al did. But of course, when you have a legend bang on about it, which is Shearer, people sit up and take notice. But he is 100% right. I mean, I've been writing about this. I've talked about it on the podcast. You look at Newcastle against Arsenal. You look at Newcastle against Liverpool. You look at Newcastle against the old Man City before they got old dithery. And you see top quality performances, and you see good body language, and you see them chasing down causes and lost causes, etc., etc. You then look at us at home to West Ham, you look at us at home to Brighton, you look at us at Everton, you look at us at Fulham, and we're a different side. And the body language is so different. You can't necessarily control form, because you form, you hit good form, you hit bad form, you hit indifferent form. But what you can control is attitude and reliability and passion. And Newcastle got to fourth top on the back of all those sort of things. They no longer do it, but to prove they can, when they're playing the good sides, you know. But this is what's worrying now. We are facing now three matches which the old Newcastle United of 2 years ago would win all three. You would beat Leicester at home. You'd beat Brentford at home in the League Cup, because Brentford are a superb side when they are at home, but they're hopeless on the road, and this time they're on the road. And you would beat Ipswich. So they're facing three games which the old Newcastle would win all three. But that is exactly what's wrong at the moment. What are we going to get from these players in terms of body language? My hope is that they'll be so stung by the criticism and by the muttering of fans who have absolutely adored them and followed them with a passion, that they'll be so stung into that, they'll produce a performance against Leicester and then sort of turn on the people that's been saying anything about them, like myself or Shearer or who else. But I mean, that would just confirm to me what they're capable of doing. It's what annoys me is that what they're capable of doing the job, but they seem, if we get a goal up or two goals up in the first quarter of an hour, would probably have the right attitude then. But if things aren't going right, we don't fight back. I mean, the second half, the whole of the game at Brentford was strewn with so many mistakes. But apart from that, we just seemed resigned in the end. And it is a massive, massive problem, because the one thing Eddie was able to control and cash in on was this camaraderie, whatever you want to call it, whether it's team spirit or whether it's all for one for all. Let's take photographs in the dressing room and celebrating the victory. Let's do a lap on it to the fans. All that seems quite futile, and in some ways a little bit embarrassing now when they play the way they play. And I don't know whether Eddie will be appealing to their better nature, throwing teacups around, or what he does to get under the skin of certain players and get the right reaction come Saturday. But surely they would want to do it for themselves. Forget the manager, forget even the fans, certainly forget the hacks. Just do it for your own pride. Look the good player that you are. Don't look an indifferent fella.
My concern is that I'm just not sure that they will be able to give that reaction that we expect for them. I think it's against a so-called inferior side, which has been an issue this season and last season to a degree. There's additional pressure on the game as well. Leicester get an early goal, and that will make St James's Park a very uncomfortable place to be, I think, for Newcastle United. Or if Leicester get an early goal, hopefully the reaction is positive from Newcastle fans and they back the players. But again, you wouldn't begrudge them a bit of a grumble and a mumble given how things have gone of late. But the biggest concern I've got, John, and you mentioned it there, was Newcastle against Brentford in the second half. You can throw in Newcastle against against West Ham in the second half, and Leicester's record this season in the second half is absolutely superb. And I know they've had a change of manager, but we saw against Brighton at the weekend they were 2-0 down with 5 minutes to go, and they got it back to 2-2. They currently sit 8th in the Premier League table based solely on events after the half-time whistle. Most importantly, their record is so much better than their relegation battling rivals. So that's going to give them a little bit of an additional boost. Leicester City now have a goal difference of +3 for the final half hour of matches, a tally only bettered by the top 3 and Bournemouth. So that shows you how good Leicester are in the second half. And we know Newcastle United are better in the first half. They just haven't taken their chances against several teams. So really what it comes down to is Newcastle United making sure that if they create on Saturday, they put the ball in the back of the net. We don't want to be sitting here on Monday talking about how Newcastle United drew to Leicester, heaven forbid lost to Leicester. Aye, but in the first half, they created 4 chances, which Isak should have scored. Great save from the goalkeeper, and Jacob Murphy missed a sitter. The time for that, I think, is done now. The time for what could have been on another day, it's done. We need to see them being clinical in front of goal and making sure that they put their chances away. So if they come in the second half and the same old thing happens where their performance drops a level, they've got a 2-goal cushion to rely on.
Yeah, but we've also, in the whole kit and caboodle, we've got to get it right at the back, Andrew. We've scored 5 goals in the last 2 games. We scored 3 against Liverpool and we scored 2 against Brentford, and we didn't win either game because we let 7 goals in. I mean, the mistakes that have been made are just schoolboy errors. You see Shaw losing a header with a ball above him, you get bullied out of it. You see Hall get taken to the cleaners, again faced with the Mumba, the same as he was faced with Mo Salah, and he defensively looked terribly shaky. You see Harvey Barnes under no pressure, just pass the ball. It was a terrific pass if it was to a colleague, but it was to an opposition, and then they score. I mean, at the back, we are making mistake after mistake. We've let 21 goals in this season now. We've let 7 goals in the last 2 games over a 3-day period. What's happened to locking the back door, which is what we did 2 seasons back when we got into the Champions League? I mean, yes, you're right about taking our chances, etc. But we've scored 5 goals in the last 2 games and still not won either of them, because we're giving goals away like confetti in a wind. It is an absolute nonsense. I mean, if you look at that performance individually down at Brentford, and if any single player was left out of the side, he couldn't have a complaint because there's so many players were below par and making basic mistakes that it's absolutely frightening. I mean, the back four, the fullbacks are supposed to be England fullbacks, Livermore and Hall. And Shaw's got 80 odd caps for Switzerland, and Burns 8'6", and etc. 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 And that's just like a holiday. They just leak goals left, right, and centre. The keeper isn't covering himself in glory either at the moment. I mean, defensively, we're absolutely shocking, and we've got to stop that first and foremost. We've got to stop that against Leicester.
And of course, the man that will likely be trying to stop on Saturday is 37-year-old Jamie Vardy, who is just banging in the goals. I mean, he's some machine to still be doing it at the rate he is. He scored
Well,
against Brighton, and he's one of those players who can get into under the skin of defenders. So I think Fabian Schär might have to try and be a little bit calm on Saturday, because I can imagine Vardy definitely getting the better of him in terms of the mind games. But he's one of those players who can do nothing for like 85 minutes or 90 minutes, and he has 30 seconds of magic where he suddenly presses the accelerator and he's away and he scores. And that's the danger. You know, you can't underestimate Jamie Vardy, and Burn and Schär, whoever's tasked with keeping him quiet, is going to have a task on the hands, because he's absolutely lethal. And just because he's 37, he's by no means done.
He's very quick off the last shoulder, and he plays off the last shoulder. And once he's gone, you're not going to catch him. And certainly neither Shaw or Byrne are quick, so he's going to cause problems. The guy is 38 next month. He's 38 in January. That makes Callum Wilson a pup. And yet you look at him at 38, he's he made, when they come back from 2-0 down to draw 2-2, he scored one goal and he made the other one, and he made it through being very unselfish and made it terrifically. And by the way, that was in the 86th and 92nd minute. And that completed at the age of 38, just a month short of 38. That was his third match in 6 days. Callum Wilson's lucky if he plays 3 matches in a year. I mean, you know, his fitness record, Jamie Vardy, is absolutely top of the range. And
Can we make a joke, John, just about? I mean, I don't want to make a joke, but we'll try and be light-hearted about fatigue. And if he be playing under Eddie Howe, he might have been on the bench in midweek. Because
oh, yeah, well, yes, because this he was scored in the 86th minute, and he made the winner in the 92nd minute, and it was his third game in 6 days. A 38-year-old. He didn't look tired when he did that, did he? He looked absolutely razor sharp, and you know that's what they've got with a 38-year-old, and we have Callum, bless him, and I feel sorry for Callum because he's a good player, but it's no good being a good player if you can come on 10 minutes and you don't influence the game, and that's what we're stuck with at the moment. You're right. We would say Jamie Vardy would need a rest. He wouldn't have, at 38, we wouldn't have played him 3 times in 6 days. I mean, we went down to Brentford and we left out 2 of our stars who were stars against Liverpool and were outstanding, Anthony Gordon and Tonali, both supposed to be too tired, and they're in their early 20s. They were supposed to be too tired to be able to start at Brentford. They've surely got to come back for this game, by the way. But I mean, how can they be too tired? And Jamie Vardy, who's got 10 years older than both of them, is running about like a lamb in a field.
yeah, that'll be the question many people are asking, and many people were, I think, a bit shocked that Tonali didn't start. Eddie Howe had dropped the hint about fatigue, and Eddie Howe will say he's got to manage him right. You know, you don't want to
What's
risk
wrong with
him
him,
picking
like?
up an injury. Go
What's
on, John.
wrong with him? What are you got to manage him right for? I mean, Italy manage him right. They play him for 90 minutes every international. He's the star man.
Yeah, like I say, a lot of people were put out by that team sheet, but like you say, he has to start against Leicester on Saturday,
And
and
so
we'll
sure.
run through the team now, John, just quickly. So Nick Pope in goal. There is a question about right back. I think a lot of people would like to see Kieran Trippier come back into the squad to have that
Yeah.
experience and leadership. Is that a little bit harsh on Tino Livramento?
No. He's a young man learning the game. And we've got to stop worrying about whether we're being harsh on somebody. We've got to pick a team that's going to win because we're not doing it too often. And if that means Trippier back, if he's able to have 90 minutes, and only Eddie will know whether he would risk him for 90 minutes or is he got to. I mean, we are so cautious about players. We get told all the time, you know, that they can't play too many matches, etc. As I go back to Jamie Vardy, it doesn't seem to affect him. But it wouldn't be too hard. Livramento has got to learn that he might be a full England international now, and you know how, you know, the talent I think the boy's got. But if he needs to be out for Newcastle to win, he needs to be out. But I mean, any of the back four, you know, could be dropped on the current performance. There won't be because we haven't got people to bring in. You know, who we're going to bring in the 2 centre-half positions, for example. I mean, Lloyd Kelly's the only one available, and he didn't cover himself in glory last time he played. But I mean, you can go Livermento, Shaw, Byrne, and Hall, and say on that performances at Brentford, you could leave any of them out or all of them out. Only you can't.
Yeah, I think Trippier will start actually on Saturday. I think Eddie Howe will give him the nod. You go into the midfield three, and this is always the big question. It's the one we talk about every single week, and I think that's actually part of the problem is that he hasn't managed to nail down that midfield three consistently. Joelinton, Tonali, Bruno were perfectly against Liverpool. It was a really good display. They would be my three on Saturday. What would your three be?
Would be them because they did it against Liverpool. You've got to bring Tonali back. You haven't got that much option on what you can do in there because Willock is, I'm worried about Joe. He's becoming the new Callum Wilson, isn't he? In terms of injuries, he is becoming regularly, he didn't make this squad at all down at Brentford. Nothing had been said, and it turned out afterwards he's got some sort of hamstring problem. The poor lad is got regular physical problems now. So he won't start. The only person that would be pushing for a place is Longstaff, and he come in for Tonali and didn't cover himself in glory. So Tonali comes back. He will go. I mean, Joe wasn't wonderful down at Brentford, but then who was? But you would go with Tonali, Bruno, and Big Joe. And up front, you've got Gordon outside left, you've got Isaac, and then what do you do about outside right? You've got to play Gordon outside left, not outside right, because I don't know that he likes playing body language. He doesn't like playing outside right, so he might go north if he plays there. He is a good left winger, so you play him there, you play Isaac up top, and you probably end up playing Jacob Murphy on the right because he comes back and he helps out defensively. Harvey Barnes doesn't do that. He's not a right winger either, but he's sometimes been pushed into that. But Harvey Barnes doesn't help out defensively in any way, shape, or form. He just scores goals, but his rest of his performances are very average. So and he likes Murphy. He's certainly not going to start Almiron.
No,
So
I,
there you go.
I tell you what, though, John, if you could somehow morph Harvey Barnes and Jacob Murphy together, so you had Jacob Murphy's defensive capabilities and application, and you had Harvey Barnes' ability to finish, you'd have one hell of a winger there because we've seen Harvey Barnes score on Saturday against Brentford. But yet again, for the second game in a row, we've seen Jacob Murphy miss some golden chances. If he gets into
Yeah,
the position again on Saturday, because I do think he'll start, we have to see him taking some of the chances because he's getting into the positions. He's just
he's got
sadly for
he's got
him, it just reaffirms what Newcastle are lacking. They are lacking a top outside right. That's what they're lacking. No doubt in his effort, no doubt in commitment. Lovely lad. I'm happy. He's achieving what he's doing, but he has to take his chances. He's missed too many good chances in the last two games.
but he won't suddenly turn into a 30 goal a season man. I mean,
No.
it's not in him. Well, I mean, he's not going to turn to a 10 goal a season man. It's just not in him. He doesn't score goals. The same with Bonds. That's all he does, and it sounds ludicrous, doesn't it? All he does is score goals when that's what the game's all about. But you take the goals away from Bonds, and what does he give the team? He never tracks back. He lets somebody run off him. He's not at all bothered about that. His build-up play. It's not as if he's carving people open. Gordon goes inside, goes outside, gets to the touchline, pulls it back. He'll open play up. Barnes doesn't. Barnes is very disappointing to me, and then he suddenly scores a goal, and that resurrects him. And you look at his record. I think he's something like joint top scorer, or just behind Isaac on goals for us, Barnes, which makes you think he's automatically a first team starter. But he's a very disappointing player to me. He really is. We haven't got an outside right because you play Murphy and he'll help out defensively and all that, and he'll put in a decent cross from time to time, and he's quick and he's enthusiastic, but he won't score. And if you play Barnes, he might score, but he won't do out else, and players will run off him all day long. You haven't got an outside right. That's something that we've got to do something about in January. And we can't wait till the summer. We've got to do something about it in January.
Yeah, many people, if not everyone, will agree with you, John. Leicester, a bit of an unknown because obviously they've gone and got Ruud van Nistelrooy, who started his managerial career at Leicester in absolute superb fashion. I think under Steve Cooper, they would have come into this game, sat back, tried to absorb Newcastle and hit them on the counter, which is not what Newcastle are comfortable doing. They don't like that. But I've spoken to a chap called Jordan Blackwell who covers Leicester for the Leicestershire Live, Leicester Mercury. He'll be on the channel on Friday morning, providing the view from the opposition. But I just wanted to get a bit of a feel for Leicester, because I didn't want to come into this episode with you, John, and ask you questions about Leicester without having a bit of knowledge about how they're doing under Ruud. And it's only 2 games in, so it's a little bit difficult to nail down. But I asked him whether he thinks Leicester will sit back on Saturday and counter. And Jordan replied, they don't really sit too deep, but they'll try to play on the counter if they take the lead. That's what they did against West Ham. They won that game 3-1. But otherwise, I think they'll try to keep the ball. They had 56% possession against Brighton, and they played better in the draw with Brighton than they did in the win over West Ham, where they had, I think they had 38.9% possession against West Ham. So it looks like, to begin with, John, Ruud van Nistelrooy will try and take the game maybe to Newcastle United, which will, play into Newcastle's hands, because they like to be the counter-attacking side.
Well, hopefully, I mean, Van Nistelrooy was an out-and-out centre forward, and I think he thinks like a centre forward, and he wants his teams to play like a centre forward. He has got 4 points out of 6, and he got good results at Manchester United when he was in boss, and he got good results back home. I don't think he's lost a game for about a year. Now it's going to come, but he will have them up for this on the 2 results they've had under him. Coming here, and he'll be telling them that we are fragile. We are fragile mentally. We're fragile. And he'll say, if they silence the crowd, they can do this, that, and the other. And it's true, and they will perhaps come at us a little bit, which will help us. But hey, at the end of the day, we can forget about them. We've got to get ourselves right. We've got to have the right attitude. We've got to have the right thoughts between the 2 years, because Leicester are the sort of team you get 3 points against. I don't care whether, Ruud van Nistelrooy's manager, Cooper's manager, or little Lord Fauntleroy's manager. You still beat Leicester if you've got anything about you. And if we get the right attitude, we beat Leicester. Because what's wrong with Newcastle at the moment is we beat ourselves. We actually beat ourselves, and that's what's been happening time and time again. And it's so frustrating, because it is so wrong. Our attitude is so wrong. Not everybody's, not all 11 of the team are like that, but it's a team game. You've only got to have 4 or 5, especially if you get your big hitters who are just ready to shrug their shoulders if things start going wrong, and you're dead. And when you take man for man the team we could put out on Saturday and think of them in the pump and take them man for man, we are a better side. There's absolutely no question about that. But we're not the better side unless we really want to go hammer and tongs at it and have the right attitude. And we do not have. It's no good ducking off, and it doesn't mean that we don't care or we're being Jonas it's because we care. We get so annoyed about what's happening with them, because they're better than they're making themselves out to be, and that infuriates me more. When I look at Murphy missing a chance, I think, well, that's Murphy. I can't get. I get furious at the chance missing, but I just think he lacks. He isn't a finisher, and so it doesn't happen. But I look at some other players, and I think you can do well in those situations, but you're not, and that's what infuriates me. They're selling themselves short, but in doing that, they're selling the manager short, and they're selling the fans short, and they're selling their teammates who are really bursting the gut. The few that are, they're selling them short as well.
How big of a game is it then on Saturday? Because if we just look at the table, John, Newcastle, as you've mentioned, lie 12th. A win, another results going their way, would put them up to no more than 9th, because Brentford and Fulham on 23 points, so they can't go any higher than that. Leicester down in 16th on 14 points. So a win would take them up to 17 and take them within 3 of Newcastle United. You've got West Ham United 14th on 15. So that would take them within 2 points of Newcastle United if Newcastle lost to Leicester on Saturday. There's a gap forming, and the teams below are picking up results. It feels like a very, very important game in terms of, first off, the table, because you want to keep within touch and distance of those above you, but also the cup game on Wednesday. You need that momentum.
Well, I mean, the whole thing is really in the melting pot now, because the Newcastle United we know would beat Leicester, they would beat Brentford, and they would beat Ipswich away, which is the next three games to play. And Eddie Howe personally needs three wins out of that. I mean, if we beat Leicester and we get 3 points at Ipswich, and most teams are getting 3 points at Ipswich, or Ipswich don't win matches. They try like Billio, but they don't win matches. They get done. And Newcastle can, if they get 3 wins, it looks a lot healthier. That takes us into Christmas. But can you imagine if we don't? I mean, we've got to be in the semi-final of the League Cup. That, do you realise at this moment, Andrew, our best chance of getting into Europe is to win the League Cup? Because we beat Brentford at home, and they're embarrassing away from home. So we beat Brentford at home, we're in the semi-final. Now we've got more chance of making Europe through the League Cup than we have through the league position, the way things are going at the moment. But we being Newcastle United, need to beat Leicester and to beat Brentford before we start thinking of Ipswich. Because if we don't beat them, the season is in trouble, and so is Eddie Howe. If we go out the League Cup at this stage when we've got a match like Brentford at home and we haven't picked up a win against Leicester, Eddie Howe's in trouble. I don't think, actually, with all this doom and gloom, I don't think that'll happen, by the way. I think we will beat Leicester, and I think we will beat Brentford. But the way I just can't believe that attitude can be so bad at home. Um, After that performance against Liverpool, although of course it was against West Ham, but I just can't believe it can be as bad. And I think Leicester, for all have taken 4 points out of the last six, are no great shakes. It is the Leicester at home, Andrew, is the sort of match you want if you're in trouble, to get out of trouble. It's the sort of match you want. But of course, you've got to take advantage of that, and that's what we are concerned about. Will we take advantage? But I mean, we deserve everything coming our way if we don't. But if they like their manager, if they think they owe their manager anything individually because he's made them good players at St James's Park, he's upped their valuation, etc., and he's upped their wages. If they owe the manager anything, they get the results in these next two games. Because if they don't, they've put Eddie Howe right in it.
I'm going to ask you for your score prediction in a moment, but I just want to quickly test you on something, John, because we know how good Ruud van Nistelrooy was for Manchester United as a striker.
Mm.
Do you want to hedge a guess at how many goals he scored against Newcastle United? He played 10 times against Newcastle. And do you want to hedge a guess at how many goals he scored?
Oh, it would probably be a lot. It could be 15.
He scored 11, and that's the most against any team he faced. So he scored the most goals against Newcastle United. Fulham was second in the list. He scored 10 goals against Fulham. So fingers crossed his strikers don't have as good as a time
Well,
against Newcastle as he did in his playing career.
we Geordies have never loved rude people, and we didn't like Ruud Gullit because he almost got with a Shearer, and we don't like Van Nistelrooy because of what he did at Manchester United, and now he wants to rain on our parade on Saturday. So we don't like rude people. But we've got to take care of him. He's not out on the pitch. He's sitting in the dugout, and he can't even come on as a sub. So he can't do us personally any harm this weekend. We've got to go out and look after ourselves. I mean, I'm not bothered about the way they play. I'm bothered about the way we play, Andrew. I'll be looking at us. If we do the right things, we win. It's as simple as that. And if we do the wrong things, we don't.
Well, that leads us on to the question of the result prediction. How is it going to go?
I think we'll win, despite everything we've said. And etc., etc. I just can't believe that these players individually can't be absolutely stung by the comments. They'll think they're badly done to, because they think the fans just adore them, and they do adore them, and they've been wonderful to them, and etc., etc. And they think that should be a given. And now there's a few mutterings here, and they're hearing these few mutterings. I'm hoping that it's stinging them into some sort of retaliation for their own sake. I'll show them that I'm a good player, and I'll go out there and do what I can do, and then I'll do like Anthony Gordon, when he did the fingers after scoring. Everybody's talking about, yeah, well, go on, do it again, and I don't mind the fingers again. Just go and get the job done. You're good enough. You're all good enough. But that makes it a bigger disgrace for me. I mean, when we think of Anthony Gordon, when we think of Isaac, when we think of Bruno, when we think of Tonali, when we think of Big Joe, I mean, we've got players that are far too good for Leicester. We've got the two England fullbacks. The kids have been picked for England in the last wedge of internationals. Man for man, we are a much better team. So prove you're better. Go and do the job. It is easier to do the job against Leicester than it was against Liverpool. But Wharf made a fist of it against Liverpool. It's easier to do a job against Leicester than it is against Arsenal. But we beat Arsenal. How the hair oil can we beat Arsenal and draw with Liverpool when Liverpool slaughtered everybody and put on a performance and show bravery and courage, and then not do it against the so-called inferior sides? It's that to me, Andrew, that is unforgivable. It is unforgivable because it's got nothing to do with talent or lack of talent. It's your mental capacity.
Yeah, you, me, Eddie Howe, probably scratching our heads, wondering what the answer is to that question. Because, like you say, brilliant against the top sides, terrible against the so-called inferior sides, and that's why, John, I'm a little bit nervous for Saturday. I'm going to go for a
Oh,
draw.
you're bound to be nervous. We're all nervous because we do. And by the way, a draw, and I think I heard you there. You said a draw, Andrew.
Yeah, a
A
draw. Yeah,
draw is an outrageously bad result. Against Leicester at home. I mean, you're not forecasting what you want to happen. Of course, you want Newcastle to win. But let's make no mistake, a home draw with Leicester would be absolutely deflating. We should. I mean, we will end up 12th in the table at the end of the season if we draw at home to Leicester and do things like that. You beat Leicester, for goodness sake. I mean, it is absolutely nonsensical. A team with the talent. I mean, you think of Isaac and his pump, and Gordon and his pump, and Bruno and Tonali and Joe Linton and Shaw when he's at his imperial best, and two England fullbacks, and we get a draw with Leicester. Behave yourself. We ought. I know where you're coming from. That's what our worry is. But we won't get relief through. Oh well, we didn't lose to Leicester. We got a draw. Can we build on that? We've got to blow this lot away, and it's about time we did. And man for man, we're good enough to do it. The only thing that's wrong is the mental attitude might be wrong. But
you say
isn't
they've got
that
to.
awful?
You say they've got to blow them away. Do you care about how the win comes, or are you wanting to see a good performance as well?
I mean, first and foremost, I want us to win, but I do care about how it comes, because if we are going to sustain anything in the second half of the season and finish respectable in the league and perhaps get into the minor European places, then we have got to start not winning luckily. We've got to start blowing away sides like Leicester. We've got to start blowing away sides like Brentford when Brentford are away from home. We've got to start winning at Ipswich, who are struggling. We've got to beat those sides and blow them away, beat them convincingly, because that's. I mean, I would be going around the dressing room and say, Joe Linton, do you think you're a good player? Anthony Gordon, do you think you're a good player? Isaac, do you think you're a good player? Bruno, do you think you're a good player? Right. If you're so good, get out there and do and blow this side off the park. Because if you're as good as you think you are, you will blow this side away. You will blow this side away. And these players are good players, but they've got to be on it. They've got to be on it. Now, what I can't understand is why aren't they on it for their own pride? Forget about doing it for the badge and kissing the badge and doing it for the fans and doing it for the manager. Just do it for yourselves. Do it so you can look yourself in the mirror and like what you see and not be ashamed of your performance. You can't say to anybody they combed their hair after going in the shower at Brentford and looked in the mirror like what they saw after a performance like that. They shouldn't. I mean, I would avoid looking in the mirror because I would wonder what's looking back at me. And I wouldn't like what's looking back at me after a performance like that. They are better than that. And a draw with Leicester would be a damaging result. They've got to beat this side. You beat Leicester. You've got to beat Brentford and be in the semi-final of the Carabao Cup. And if you've got anything about you, you go to Ipswich and win. It's as simple or as difficult as that. And you know what? It's up to the players. It's up to the players as much as the manager. If each player plays for his own pride, we win. If they don't care about their own pride, we don't win.
Well, fingers crossed, John. They do pick up the victory, and the players do step up to the plate. And I still believe they're playing for the manager, but I think they have to realise kind of where some of the noise is heading. Like you say, victory on Saturday is a must, and they need to show that they can do it. Because for me, the majority of the blame does lie with the players and not Eddie Howe. And I'm just going to finish off quickly, John, on a quote here from Alan Shearer in The Athletic, and he says Eddie Howe deserves time and patience. And I think at this moment in time, both you and I think the majority of our viewers and listeners agree with that. And hopefully Eddie Howe can turn this around. The players can grab a few goals and finish the year with a flourish. But I have to focus on Leicester. Fingers crossed they get the victory. Thank you, John, for popping onto the podcast and providing the match preview to you guys listening. Please do give the video a thumbs up, share it across your social media platforms, get into the comments as well. I'll get back to each and every single one of you. Click that link for your discounted NordVPN plan. Make a wonderful Christmas present, maybe a bit of a boring one, but at least you'd be secure and safe. And I'm sure you could think of a lot of people who would love that added protection. Thank you very much for watching, guys. Thank you very much for listening. And for myself and John, we'll see you guys very soon.